Single mom runs to the Mafia boss, crying, "Help, my baby is dying." What happened next? Shocked. A single mom hits a steel door in the rain, begging the city's most feared man to save a child running out of time. He opens it, not for mercy, but for control, and turns a mansion into an ICU overnight. Then a quiet test explodes a secret he never expected, a rival puts a price on a heartbeat, and the streets answer with fire. The mom fights every rule. The boss answers with guards, doctors, and a promise that sounds like a threat. When a fake ambulance steals the baby, the hunt turns feral. Convoys, gunsmoke, and a deal that could damn them both. And waiting at the end is a single choice. Break the law to save a life, or watch that life fade. If the only man who can save your child is the devil himself, how much of your soul are you willing to trade? Through the rain-slicked windows, lightning illuminates the Valenti townhouse's mahogany-paneled walls as Maeve paces beside Theo's hastily assembled medical setup. Her wet shoes squeak against the polished floors, but she can't bring herself to care about the puddles she's leaving. Every few steps, she glances at the monitors, tracking her son's vital signs. The number's a constant reminder of how precarious his situation is. Roman stands by the doorway, his presence both reassuring and unsettling. His black suit remains immaculate despite the chaos, and his eyes never leave the scene before him. Enzo and Silvio hover in the hallway, their watchful gazes sweeping the perimeter with practiced efficiency. His temperature is starting to respond to the medication, Dr. Bennett announces, checking the digital readout. His movements are precise as he adjusts the oxygen flow. But we need to keep close watch through the night. Maeve's fingers brush against Theo's forehead, still warm, but not blazing as before. The fever's been getting worse for 3 days, she explains, her voice rough with exhaustion. I tried everything the pediatrician suggested, but you did the right thing bringing him here, Bennett interrupts, his tone professional but kind. The next 24 hours will be critical. Roman moves closer, his footsteps silent on the expensive carpet. Whatever equipment or specialists you need, doctor, consider it done. Maeve watches as Silvio efficiently directs a pair of men setting up additional medical equipment. The room, clearly a luxury guest suite just hours ago, now resembles a private hospital room. The transformation would be impressive if she weren't so terrified for her son. I need to change him, Maeve says, reaching for the diaper bag she'd barely managed to grab in their rush out the door. Fresh supplies are being delivered, Roman states, as if summoning baby items at midnight is perfectly normal. Along with clothes for both of you. The casualness of his control makes her stomach clench. I can get our things from home. You're not leaving. His tone brooks no argument. It's not safe. Not safe? Maeve's hand still on Theo's blanket. What do you mean? The moment you came to me, you became my responsibility. Roman's dark eyes meet hers. That means protection, but it also means following my rules. Bennett clears his throat. I need to establish a baseline for his cardiac function. Would you hold him still for the portable echo? Grateful for the interruption, Maeve focuses on keeping Theo calm as Bennett performs the scan. The baby whimpers, and she hums softly, the same lullaby she's sung since his first night in the NICU. Remarkable, Silvio murmurs from his position by the door. He settles so quickly for you. He's a fighter, Maeve responds, not taking her eyes off her son. He's been proving people wrong since before he was born. The medical equipment beeps steadily as Bennett studies the echogram display. Maeve catches Roman watching the procedure with intense focus, as if memorizing every detail. His presence fills the room without him saying a word, and she forces herself to remember why she's here, what he represents, and what he can provide. The structural abnormality is progressing faster than his previous scans indicated, Bennett explains, pointing to areas on the screen. We need to start building a surgical plan immediately. Timeline, Roman asks. Days, not weeks. I'll make calls tonight, but we'll need a specialized surgical team and facility. Maeve's knees weaken. The waiting list is no longer your concern, Roman cuts in. Dr. Bennett will handle the medical logistics. Enzo will coordinate security. You focus on keeping him stable. A crash of thunder makes them all jump, except Roman and his men. Theo starts to cry, and Maeve lifts him carefully, mindful of the monitoring leads. Shh, baby, Mama's here, she whispers, swaying gently. The storm's getting worse, Enzo reports from the hallway. Streets are starting to flood, Roman nods. Double the perimeter watch. No one in or out without direct clearance. The heavy implications of those orders settle over Maeve as she soothes her son. She's trapped here now, caught between her desperate need for help and the growing awareness of exactly what kind of help she's accepted. Bennett makes notes in a medical file, his pen scratching against paper. I'll stay tonight to monitor him. We should see improvement in his numbers by morning if the treatment plan holds. I'll have coffee sent up, Roman says, then looks at Maeve. You should try to rest while you can. She almost laughs at the suggestion. I'm not leaving him. There's a reclining chair being brought in, he responds, as if he'd anticipated her protest. You'll be no good to him if you collapse. Before she can argue, Silvio appears with the promised chair, positioning it next to Theo's medical bed. The leather is soft and expensive, like everything else in this house, but Maeve barely notices as she sinks into it. Theo still cradled against her, chest. The clock on the wall shows 12:03 a.m. as Bennett checks the monitors one final time. Rain continues to lash against the windows, and somewhere in the house, she hears the front door close with a resounding thud. The sound echoes with finality, marking the moment she traded her freedom for her son's survival. Theo's breathing evens out as the medication works through his system. Maeve strokes his back, counting each rise and fall, while Roman's men take up their positions and the night settles into a tense vigil. There's no going back now. She's inside the lion's den, and only time will tell if she's made a deal with the devil or found an unlikely salvation. At 12:07 a.m., the quiet efficiency of Roman's staff filled the nursery with medical supplies. Their footsteps were nearly silent on the thick carpet as they wheeled in a compact pharmaceutical refrigerator and arranged monitoring equipment against the walls. The soft amber lighting cast a gentle glow over Theo's sleeping form, while machines beeped steadily in the background. Roman guided Maeve toward the medical-grade crib, where Bennett was adjusting Theo's oxygen flow. The doctor's expression was grave as he turned to face them, clipboard in hand. I need to be clear about what we're dealing with, Bennett said, his voice low but direct. Theo requires highly specialized care, a surgical team with specific pediatric cardiac experience, an immediate priority slot, and a particular type of valve that's in extremely limited supply. Maeve's fingers curled around the crib rail. How limited? There are perhaps 3 suitable valves available in the country right now. Bennett glanced at Roman. Through conventional channels, the waiting list is months long. Through quiet channels, he let the implication hang in the air. I can make it happen, Roman stated, his presence solid and unwavering beside Maeve. But I need you to understand what that means. Full protection arrangement. You both stay here, under my security, my medical oversight. No exceptions. No. Maeve shook her head, though her voice trembled. I won't give up control over decisions about my son. This isn't about control for control's sake. Roman's tone remained measured, almost gentle. To keep him breathing, I have to control the variables. Every person who enters this house, every delivery, every communication, it all has to be vetted and secured. Bennett interrupted the tension by preparing to draw blood samples. We need emergency cross-matching and genetic markers in case he requires immediate blood products. I'll need your consent, Maeve. She stared at the forms Bennett held out, her hands shaking as she took them. The medical terminology blurred before her eyes, but she forced herself to focus. Each signature felt like another step deeper into Roman's world. Across the room, Enzo and Silvio moved with practiced precision, trading positions at windows and doorways. Their weapons were concealed, but present, a constant reminder of the dangerous world she'd stepped into. A slim man with sharp features, Cade, Roman's tech specialist, worked silently at a laptop, his fingers flying over the keys as he fortified the townhouse's digital defenses. The network's locked down, Cade reported without looking up. I'm running interference protocols and setting up monitoring for any suspicious traffic in the area. Roman nodded, then turned back to Maeve. Whatever you need, clothes, personal items, anything for Theo, give the list to Silvio. My people will retrieve everything. The domesticity of the request felt surreal against the backdrop of armed guards and medical equipment. Maeve watched as Bennett drew several vials of blood from Theo's tiny arm, the baby staying mercifully asleep through the procedure. Time crept by in a haze of vital sign checks and quiet conversations between Roman and his men. At 2:20 a.m., Bennett announced that Theo's fever had finally broken. The news made Maeve's knees weak with relief, and she sank into the plush chair beside the crib. Roman appeared beside her with a cashmere blanket, draping it over her legs without comment. The gesture was unexpectedly gentle from a man who commanded such power, and Maeve found herself too exhausted to refuse the comfort. The storm outside had begun to ease, its fury reduced to a steady drumming against the windows. Maeve fought to keep her eyes open, counting Theo's breaths as they evened out into peaceful sleep. The monitors cast a blue glow across his face, making him look even more fragile than usual. "Rest," Roman said quietly. "Bennett will monitor him, and my men are on rotation. Nothing will reach him here." Maeve wanted to argue, to insist she needed to stay awake, but exhaustion was winning. Her head dipped forward, then jerked up again as she struggled against sleep. Through heavy eyes, she watched Roman move about the room, speaking in low tones with his men. Enzo reported on perimeter checks, while Silvio detailed the security rotation. Cade's typing created a soft background rhythm, punctuated by the steady beeping of Theo's monitors. The city's usual cacophony of sirens began to fade as the night deepened. At 3:10 a.m., Roman stood in the doorway, his silhouette sharp against the hallway light. His gaze moved from Theo's sleeping form to Maeve's half-conscious figure in the chair, taking in the tableau of this unexpected family that had landed in his domain. With a subtle gesture to Enzo, Roman gave the order to double the exterior patrol for the remainder of the night. His protection would be absolute, whether Maeve had fully accepted it or not. The night staff moved with practiced silence, the whisper of their movements barely disturbing the nursery's quiet atmosphere. Moonlight filtered through the rain-streaked windows, casting patterns across the floor. The medical equipment hummed softly, monitoring every breath and heartbeat of the child who had changed the dynamics of Roman's carefully controlled world in a single night. In the chair, Maeve's breathing had finally evened out into the rhythm of sleep, her hand still stretched toward Theo's crib, even in unconsciousness. The storm's last remnants rattled the windows, but inside the townhouse, layers of security, both human and electronic, stood guard. Bennett made notes in Theo's chart while checking the latest readings, his movements efficient and practiced. The pharmaceutical refrigerator purred quietly in the corner, stocked with everything needed to maintain Theo's stability through the night. Sunlight crept through the nursery's reinforced windows as Maeve stirred from her uncomfortable sleep at 6:45 a.m. Her neck ached from the chair, and reality crashed back as she took in the medical equipment surrounding Theo's crib. The monitors blinked steadily, each beep a reminder that they were safe, but not free. She stretched, wincing at stiff muscles, when a soft knock preceded a uniformed housekeeper entering with a silver tray. "Coffee, Ms. Carter? There's cream and sugar if you'd like." "Thank you," Maeve murmured, noticing the discreet security cameras in the corners, their tiny red lights a constant reminder of surveillance. The coffee was excellent, probably some expensive blend she couldn't pronounce, but it tasted like gilded bars. Movement in the hallway caught her attention. Roman stood waiting, impeccable in a charcoal suit despite the early hour. His expression was unreadable as he gestured for her to join him. "We need to discuss parameters," he said without preamble once they were in the corridor. "For Theo's safety and treatment, there are non-negotiable rules." Maeve crossed her arms. "Let's hear them." "No unescorted outings, no press contact. All hospital visits will be coordinated through my security team. Medical decisions must route through Bennett to ensure proper timing and resource allocation." "So I'm a prisoner," Maeve said flatly. "You're protected. I want second opinions, independent ones." "Bennett consults with a global network. He's coordinating the best." "That's not enough," Maeve countered. "I need to be included in every call, every decision. I want to review all schedules, understand all risks. This is my son." Roman's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "You'll have transparency, access to all information, all consultations. But security measures stand. Whoever controls time controls survival, and I control both." A whimper from the nursery interrupted their standoff. Theo was fussing, likely from reflux given the way he squirmed. Before Maeve could move, Roman strode to the crib and lifted him with surprising gentleness. "Shh, Piccolo," he murmured, cradling Theo against his chest. The Italian endearment rolled off his tongue as he swayed slightly, one large hand supporting the baby's head. "Tutto andrà ben." Maeve watched, transfixed as Theo settled against Roman's shoulder. The sight of this dangerous, manhandling her son with such care made her chest tight. It was harder to maintain her defensive anger when faced with such tenderness. The morning passed in a blur of vital sign checks and quiet conversations with the medical staff. At 10 a.m., Bennett called with an update. "Early results are still processing," he reported. "We need the complete panel for a full picture. I'll have more this afternoon." "But he's stable," Maeve pressed, tension evident in her voice. "Stable," Bennett confirmed. "Keep following the current protocol. I'll call as soon as I have the full workup." By noon, the confines of the townhouse were making Maeve restless. She stepped onto the second-floor balcony, needing fresh air and a moment of pseudo-freedom. The street below was quiet, surprisingly normal given the fortress-like atmosphere inside. A glint of light caught her eye from a window across the street, the unmistakable flash of a camera lens before it disappeared. Her heart rate spiked. Silvio materialized beside her, guiding her back inside with gentle urgency. "Let's return to the nursery, Ms. Carter." Roman was in his study when Silvio reported the sighting. His jaw clenched as he absorbed the information, fingers drumming once on his desk before he reached for his phone. "Increase perimeter sweeps," he ordered. "I want that photographer identified." Maeve headed back to the nursery at 12:30 for Theo's feeding, trying to maintain normalcy despite the heightened tension in the house. Through the window, she glimpsed Enzo on the roof, adjusting what looked like surveillance equipment. The sound of car doors closing drew her attention to the street. A black SUV had appeared 2 blocks away, parking with a clear view of the townhouse. The occupants waited, engine off, their presence a new piece in an increasingly complex puzzle. Inside the nursery, Theo gurgled as she lifted him, unaware of the forces gathering around him. The medical equipment continued its steady rhythm of beeps and measurements, while outside, the layers of protection and threat grew thicker by the hour. Maeve settled into the rocking chair, cradling Theo close as she prepared his bottle. The morning's conversation with Roman echoed in her mind. Transparency, but not freedom. Protection that felt like possession. Yet as she watched her son's tiny fingers curl around the bottle, she knew she'd accept far worse constraints to keep him safe. The housekeeper returned with fresh coffee and a light lunch, moving efficiently around the medical equipment. Through the open door, Maeve could hear the quiet bustle of the household. Security teams changing shifts, staff coordinating deliveries, all the invisible machinery that kept Roman's world running smoothly. In the distance, sirens wailed. A common New York sound that now carried new weight. Every external noise seemed to trigger a subtle shift in the security team's movements, a constant dance of protection that Maeve was beginning to recognize despite herself. Theo finished his bottle and dozed against her shoulder, his breath warm and steady on her neck. For now, at least, he was stable, monitored, and safe. The price of that safety loomed large, but as Maeve watched another of Roman's men do a perimeter check on the street below, she wondered if she'd already started adjusting to this new reality where protection and imprisonment blurred into one. At 3:05 p.m., Bennett strode into Roman's office with a thick manila envelope, his expression carefully neutral. He spread the lab results across the mahogany desk while Maeve hovered nearby, her fingers twisting the hem of her sweater. "First, the blood typing and cross-matching is complete," Bennett began, pointing to columns of data. "We have compatibility profiles for emergency transfusion protocols." Roman leaned forward, his attention razor-sharp. "And the genetic markers?" Bennett cleared his throat. "The markers indicate..." He paused, glancing between them. "There's a clear paternal match between Theo and Mr. Valenti." The air seemed to vanish from the room. Maeve gripped the back of a leather chair, her knees threatening to buckle. Roman went perfectly still, his face a mask of control, while his mind visibly recalibrated everything he thought he knew. 2 years ago, the Renaissance Hotel bar, a shared bottle of wine and conversation that felt like coming up for air. 1 hour of connection neither had planned, both believing they'd never meet again. No names exchanged, just the understanding of 2 souls equally alone. "I tried to find you," Maeve whispered, her voice cracking, "for weeks after, but the hotel had no record of who'd been there that night. When I found out I was pregnant..." She swallowed hard. "I had to move forward alone." Roman's fingers pressed into the desk's edge, the only visible sign of his tension. He didn't rage or accuse. Instead, he turned to Bennett with deadly calm. "I'll be first on the donor list for any blood products he needs." "Of course," Bennett agreed quickly. "Cade," Roman called, and his tech specialist materialized in the doorway. "Lock down every medical channel connected to Theo's records. Full encryption, restricted access." "Already on it," Cade nodded, tablet in hand. "Wait," Maeve protested, finding her voice. "I've been making every decision for him since before he was born. Every doctor's appointment, every medication, every middle-of-the-night fever..." "And now we decide together," Roman cut in, his tone brooking no argument. "Every choice, every step forward, he's my son." The weight of those 3 words hung in the air between them. Before either could speak again, Silvio appeared in the doorway, tension evident in his stance. "Sir, we've identified the photographer from this morning," he reported. "He's connected to Oleg Morozov. Been taking shots of the balcony, the baby equipment visible through windows." Roman's expression hardened to granite. "Additional vehicles," he ordered. "Full armor, and plot a clean route to the hospital for the evening echo. No regular patterns, no predictable timing. Silvio nodded and disappeared to make arrangements while Cade's fingers flew across his tablet, adjusting security protocols. Bennett gathered the lab results into organized piles, carefully avoiding eye contact with anyone. Maeve sank into the chair she'd been gripping, overwhelmed by how quickly her world was shifting. Roman moved to stand near her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. "I would have been there," he said quietly, for her ears alone. "Every step. Every decision." "I know that now," she whispered back. "But I didn't then. I just knew I had to protect him. And now I protect you both." His voice carried the weight of an oath. The next hour passed in a blur of preparation. Security teams positioned vehicles, mapped routes, and established backup plans. Medical equipment was checked and double-checked. Maeve packed Theo's diaper bag with mechanical precision while her mind spun with the afternoon's revelations. Roman moved through it all with focused efficiency, issuing orders and confirming details. But his eyes kept returning to Theo, studying their son's features with new understanding. The curve of his nose, the set of his jaw, pieces of himself he hadn't known to look for before. At 4:15 p.m., Bennett cleared them to move. Maeve lifted Theo from his crib, pressing a kiss to his forehead before settling him into the carrier. Roman's hand closed over the handle beside hers, warm and steady. "Ready?" he asked, though it wasn't really a question. Maeve nodded, and they moved as one toward the door. The convoy waited outside, a formation of black vehicles with tinted windows. Gray clouds hung low over the city as they descended the townhouse steps. At exactly 4:20 p.m., they pulled away from the curb, merging smoothly into traffic. Maeve watched the familiar street slide past, transformed now by armored glass and the weight of everything that had changed in a single afternoon. Beside her, Roman's hand hadn't left the carrier handle, his grip as much a claim as a protection. The city flowed around them, oblivious to the drama unfolding behind dark windows, a father discovering his son, a mother sharing her greatest secret, and a baby who had no idea he was the center of a world rapidly reorganizing itself around his safety. Traffic lights changed, car horns honked, and pedestrians hurried past. While inside their protected bubble, 3 people who had been strangers that morning were learning to become something else entirely. Something that looked remarkably like family. Theo slept peacefully in his carrier, one tiny hand curled around the edge of his blanket. The medical monitors beeped steadily, marking his heartbeat like a countdown to whatever came next. Outside, the gray sky seemed to press closer, but inside the vehicle, a new reality was already taking hold. One where decisions were shared, protection was absolute, and loneliness was becoming a memory rather than a companion. The convoy pulled up to the townhouse at 6:55 p.m., the dark streets glistening with recent rain. Maeve cradled Theo, while Roman cleared their path inside, his shoulders tight with contained tension. Bennett followed, clutching a thick folder of scan results. In the study, Bennett spread the images across Roman's mahogany desk. "There's a surgical team in Zurich," he said, tapping one of the reports. "Top-tier pediatric unit, specialized in cases like Theo's. They can take him within a week if we secure both the valve and priority placement." Roman was already on his phone, rapid-fire Italian interspersed with English as he worked his network. "The airspace clearance is handled," he announced between calls. "Working on the clinic approvals now, the anesthesia team needs specific credentials." "What about post-operative care?" Maeve interrupted, a notebook in her hands. "Pain management protocols? Will the valve need replacement as he grows? What about physical therapy milestones?" Roman paused mid-dial. "Bennett will coordinate." "I need to know everything," Maeve insisted. "Every detail, every risk, every possibility. I won't be kept in the dark about my son's care." "Our son," Roman corrected sharply. "And every variable increases the risk. We move as a unit, controlled and contained." "I'm not a chess piece, you can just move around the board," Maeve shot back. "I'm his mother, and I need to understand everything that's happening." Their arguments continued through the evening, passionate but oddly respectful. Roman's jaw would tighten when Maeve pushed back, but he answered her questions. Maeve's hands would clench when Roman issued orders, but she acknowledged his expertise in coordinating complex operations. At 9:40 p.m., Maeve found Roman in his office, staring at an old photograph. The frame was simple silver, containing the image of 2 young men in suits. "My brother," Roman said without turning. "Alessandro." His fingers traced the edge of the frame. "Morozov's father ordered the hit. A message," he said later, "a reminder that no one is untouchable." His voice carried decades of pain. I learned then that control isn't about power. It's about keeping the people you love breathing. Maeve moved closer, drawn by the raw honesty in his voice. I became an EMT after watching someone die while waiting for help, she admitted quietly. I swore I'd never be helpless like that again. When Theo was diagnosed, she swallowed hard. I've been running on determination and caffeine ever since. Roman turned to face her, something soft breaking through his usual mask. Before he could speak, Silvio burst through the door, his usual composure shattered. Sir, he said urgently, holding up a small black disc. Found this under the stroller. The adhesive ring is fresh, placed within the last 24 hours. Roman's transformation was instant and terrifying. Lock down the house, he ordered, already moving. Full protocols. Cade! The tech specialist appeared, taking the tracker with careful hands. On it. I'll trace the serial range. Check for Morozov's digital fingerprints. The house shifted around them, steel shutters sliding into place, security systems humming to life. Roman's men moved with practiced efficiency, checking rooms and securing access points. Maeve followed Roman to the nursery where Theo slept peacefully, unaware of the storm gathering around him. They won't touch him, Roman said, his voice deadly quiet. Not one finger, not one breath near him. Cade appeared in the doorway, his tablet glowing. Confirmed Morozov connection, the tracker's part of a batch his people acquired last month. Roman lifted Theo with infinite gentleness, cradling him close as they moved to the fortified nursery. The room was a perfect blend of comfort and security, soft blankets over bulletproof windows, gentle nightlights alongside military-grade surveillance. Maeve watched Roman settle their son in the reinforced crib, his movements so careful, so at odds with the violence she knew his hands could deliver. When he stepped back, she pressed herself against the door, feeling the cold metal against her spine. The reality of their situation hit her in waves. A rival mobster was hunting her child. The man she'd spent one passionate night with was now her protector, and somewhere in Switzerland, a surgical team was preparing to save her son's heart, if they could keep him alive long enough to get there. The clock on the wall ticked to 12:10 a.m., each second marking another moment in this new life she'd never imagined. Roman stood at the crib, his shadow falling across their sleeping son like a shield. Outside, the city hummed with its usual nighttime rhythm, oblivious to the private war being waged behind these walls. Maeve's EMT training kicked in, helping her control her breathing, pushing back the panic that threatened to overwhelm her. She focused on the steady rise and fall of Theo's chest, the quiet confidence in Roman's stance, the competent movements of his security team. The fortified nursery was a testament to Roman's preparation. Medical equipment seamlessly integrated with security measures, comfort balanced with protection. Oxygen tanks stood ready beside a rocking chair. Monitors blinked quietly next to reinforced windows. Everything Theo might need, wrapped in layers of security that spoke of both Roman's power and his fear. Silvio's discovery of the tracker had shattered any illusion of normal life, but Maeve realized she'd stopped wanting normal the moment she'd climbed those marble steps. Normal wouldn't save Theo. Normal wouldn't get him to Switzerland. Normal wouldn't protect him from men who used children as chess pieces in their power games. She straightened her spine, still pressed against the door, and met Roman's eyes across the room. His gaze held equal measures of promise and warning, the promise to protect what was his, and a warning to anyone who dared threaten them. The city dawn crept over Brooklyn, casting long shadows across unmarked vehicles and disguised security posts. By 6:30 a.m., the block had settled into an uneasy quiet, with Roman's men maintaining their vigil from strategic positions. Inside the townhouse, Maeve dozed in the nursery chair, while Theo slept peacefully, his monitors casting a soft green glow across his face. At precisely 9:02 a.m., the morning exploded. The blast rocked the street, shattering windows and setting off car alarms in a cascading symphony of chaos. The shockwave rattled the townhouse's reinforced windows, and Theo startled awake with a cry that pierced through the chaos. Down! Roman commanded, already moving. His body covered Maeve and Theo as Enzo burst through the door, weapon drawn. Car bomb at the curb, Enzo reported tersely. No casualties, message delivery. Roman's face hardened into marble. Get them to the panic room, now! The panic room was a fortress within a fortress, buried in the heart of the house. As the heavy door sealed behind them, Maeve watched the security feeds while cradling Theo. Outside, Roman's organization sprang into action with terrifying efficiency. Enzo coordinated the response through his earpiece, his voice deadly calm. Cut their Brooklyn supply lines. All of them! Call Judge Martinez about that warrant and get me the manifest for Morozov's shipment at Pier 47. Through the monitors, Maeve watched Roman work. His phone calls were brief, precise, and devastating. Each conversation tightened another noose around Morozov's operation. A shipping container seized here, a permit denied there, bank accounts flagged for investigation. The systematic dismantling of an empire conducted with surgical precision. The East Side delivery routes are compromised, Cade reported from his station. Their cash flow will be down 40% by nightfall. Maeve listened to Roman's voice through the intercom, the Arctic chill in his tone making her shiver. This was the other side of him. Not the man who held Theo so gently, but the one who could destroy lives with a phone call. The dichotomy should have terrified her. Instead, she felt an unsettling mix of fear and security. When the smoke cleared at 11:40 a.m., Maeve emerged from the panic room with Theo clutched to her chest. "We need to leave," she said, facing Roman in his office. "Find somewhere quiet, anonymous. They won't expect." "No." Roman's response was immediate, absolute. "The street is where they want us, exposed, vulnerable." He gestured to the window. "That bomb was a message. The real attack will come when we're in transit." Before Maeve could argue further, the doorbell chimed. Everyone tensed. Silvio appeared with a sealed manila envelope, already scanned for threats. Roman opened it carefully and Cade connected a thumb drive to his secure system. The video played in horrible clarity. A hospital administrator, his hands shaking slightly as he accepted an envelope thick with cash. The Morozov lieutenant's face was clearly visible, his words damning. "The list will be managed appropriately. Certain candidates will experience delays." Maeve's knees weakened as understanding hit. The waiting list that had seemed like a death sentence for Theo hadn't been fate. It had been orchestrated. Her son's life had been deliberately placed in jeopardy as part of a larger game. "Get me everything," Roman ordered Cade. "Every frame, every angle. Package it for maximum impact." Bennett arrived amid the tension, his medical bag in hand. "The Zurich team is confirming details. We need to move within the next 72 hours for optimal timing." The house hummed with activity. Security teams rotated, communications were encrypted, and plans within plans took shape. Maeve retreated to the nursery, needing the comfort of its familiar space. She settled into the rocking chair with Theo, his weight anchoring her as the world spun faster around them. Roman appeared in the doorway at 1:20 p.m., his presence drawing her attention. He spoke quietly to Enzo, but his words carried clearly. "Move the Castillo family and Elena Martinez before tonight, somewhere secure." His expression was grim. "We're about to return Morozov's hospitality." Theo dozed against Maeve's shoulder, unaware of the forces moving around him. The rocking chair creaked softly, a counterpoint to the quiet efficiency of Roman's men preparing for war. Through the window, the afternoon sun cast strange shadows on the street where the bomb had detonated just hours before. The nursery remained a bubble of peace in the storm, the monitors beeping steadily, the oxygen concentrator humming its constant rhythm, the reinforced walls standing guard. Maeve continued rocking, her hand tracing slow circles on Theo's back, while outside the room, Roman's empire mobilized for battle. Enzo moved through the house, coordinating the witness relocations, his quiet competence a reminder of why Roman trusted him with their safety. Security teams adjusted their positions based on the morning's attack, closing gaps and strengthening vulnerable points. In his tech center, Cade worked on the video evidence, building a weapon of information that would strike as surely as any bomb. The day stretched on, marked by the steady ticking of the clock and the quiet breathing of her son. Maeve found herself studying Roman whenever he passed the nursery door, seeing both versions of him at once, the ruthless protector and the gentle father, power and tenderness wrapped in one dangerous package. She wondered if this was how mob wives felt, watching their men walk the line between love and violence. But then, she wasn't his wife. She was something else entirely, the mother of his child, a woman who had stumbled into his world, seeking salvation, now caught in a war she never wanted but couldn't escape. The afternoon light faded as Roman paced his office, switching from attack to defense. If Morozov had corrupted a hospital administrator, the infection could have spread closer to home. He pulled up the access logs on his secure terminal, scanning timestamps and permissions. A red flag jumped out. Silvio's device had accessed courier route files minutes before their last transport location leaked. The revelation hit Roman like ice water in his veins. "Get me Silvio!" he ordered into the intercom. "Now!" At 5:10 p.m., Silvio entered the office, his usual steady presence, now a potential threat. Roman didn't waste time. "Explain this." He turned the screen, showing the damning log entry. Color drained from Silvio's face. "Boss, I swear on my life, on my father's grave, I didn't betray you." His hands trembled slightly. "Check deeper. Someone's trying to frame me." 20 years of loyalty means nothing if you've turned." Roman's voice was deadly quiet. "Wait." Silvio's eyes lit with sudden understanding. "That social worker, Harper Lane. She showed up in Maeve's life 4 months ago, pushing assistance programs, offering extra appointments. Too helpful, too convenient." Roman considered this. Harper had access to medical records, schedules, contact information. Everything needed to track Theo's movements. He pressed a button on his desk phone. "Cade, I need a trap." By 7:30 p.m., they had staged an elaborate deception. A decoy ambulance carried an empty carrier, following a false transport route, planted in files only Harper's compromised phone could access. Roman watched from a secure location as the vehicle moved through Brooklyn's darkening streets. At 7:42 p.m., right on schedule, Morozov's men struck. The ambush hit exactly where the fake itinerary had indicated the transport would be most vulnerable. The ambulance, staffed only by trained security, executed defensive maneuvers while capturing everything on high-resolution cameras. "Clear proof," Cade confirmed, reviewing the footage. "Harper's phone was cloned months ago. Every file she accessed went straight to Morozov's people." Rather than handle it personally, Roman made a calculated choice. He had Harper arrested by federal agents, the evidence of her cooperation with organized crime too clear to ignore. It was a message to Morozov. Some moves would be answered through legitimate channels, making retaliation more difficult. In his office, Roman faced Silvio again. The older man stood straighter now, cleared but shaken. "You're reinstated," Roman said coolly. "But remember, the next doubt will be your last." Silvio's proud shoulders slumped. "Boss, I've given my life to this family, to you, to Theo now, too." His voice cracked. "I'd die before I'd harm that baby." The warning had wounded Silvio more deeply than any physical punishment could have. Roman watched him leave, noting how the man's usually confident stride had faltered. At 9 p.m., Bennett's call brought the first real hope in days. "Zurich can take him Tuesday," the doctor reported. "The surgical team is confirmed, the valve secured. We just need to get him there safely." Roman found Maeve in the nursery, her face pale with exhaustion. 5 days, he told her. "Can you hold on that long?" She nodded, one hand resting on Theo's small chest. "Whatever keeps him safe, whatever it takes." The fight had drained from her voice, replaced by grim determination. Down the hall, Cade worked furiously on his tablet, building layer upon layer of security into the transport plan. Multiple routes, decoy vehicles, electronic countermeasures, a digital fortress to protect one tiny heart. By 10:15 p.m., the house had settled into uneasy quiet. Roman stood with Maeve in the darkened nursery, both of them watching Theo's peaceful breathing. The monitors cast a soft blue glow over his face, making him look almost ethereal. "I never thought I'd be a father," Roman said quietly. Maeve's hand found his in the darkness. "I never thought I'd need someone like you to keep us alive." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken fears and fragile hope. Outside, the city hummed with its usual nighttime energy. Inside, surrounded by cameras and guards and reinforced walls, a makeshift family held their breath, counting down the days until they could run for safety. Theo stirred slightly, making those small snuffling sounds that both parents now knew by heart. Roman's thumb traced absent patterns on Maeve's hand as they stood together in the dark. The gesture felt surprisingly intimate, not the touch of strangers forced together by circumstance, but something deeper, taking root. Through the window, they could see Enzo directing the night shift change, security teams moving with practiced precision. Cameras swept the perimeter, while signal jammers blocked unauthorized transmissions. The townhouse had become a fortress, every inch of it focused on protecting the small life breathing steadily in his crib. In his tech center, Cade's fingers flew over multiple keyboards, building redundancies into their escape plan. Each possibility had to be accounted for, each vulnerability addressed. The soft blue glow of his screens matched the monitor lights in the nursery, different kinds of guardians working in harmony. The city lights painted patterns on the nursery walls as Roman and Maeve maintained their quiet vigil. They had 5 days to get their son to safety. 5 days that would require perfect execution, unwavering focus, and a level of trust neither of them had expected to give. The next 3 days moved like clockwork in the Valenti townhouse, each hour marked by medication schedules and security protocols. At precisely 7 a.m. each morning, Maeve sat at the nursery desk with her medical log, recording Theo's vital signs with methodical care. The pages filled with numbers that told their own. Story, oxygen saturation levels, medication times, feeding schedules, and temperature readings. Bennett's pre-flight protocol added another layer of complexity. "We need him as stable as possible before wheels up," he explained, adjusting Theo's medication timing to account for the altitude changes they'd face. In the security command center, Roman ran the transport team through rehearsals. 3 routes had been mapped out, 2 decoys designed to draw attention and resources, while the primary path remained closely guarded. Enzo coordinated with trusted drivers, each selected for their ability to handle pursuit scenarios. Again, Roman would order, watching the practice runs on monitors. Faster transitions at checkpoint 3. His intensity grew with each iteration, demanding perfection. Cade worked through the nights, his fingers flying over keyboards as he built their cover identities. Private flight manifests, medical transport permits, and diplomatic clearances took shape under his careful manipulation. Each document had to withstand the closest scrutiny. "The credentials are biometric linked," he explained, showing Roman the sophisticated forgeries. "They'll scan clean at every checkpoint." The surgical consent forms sparked the most heated exchanges between Maeve and Roman. She stood in his office, arms crossed, insisting her signature alone was sufficient. "I've been his only parent for 8 months. "And now he has too," Roman countered, his voice level but firm. "I want my name on those papers." Their standoff ended unexpectedly when Roman quietly added his signature to a different set of documents, ones that named Maeve as his primary medical proxy if anything happened to him during transport. The implications of that trust weren't lost on either of them. The house staff moved carefully around their tension, keeping supplies stocked and meals regular despite the charged atmosphere. Every window was checked hourly, every delivery scrutinized, every visitor logged and verified. Theo seemed to sense the underlying current of anxiety, becoming more restless as the days passed. Maeve found herself singing more often, soft lullabies that helped mask the sound of security radio checks and weapon inspections. At 11:20 p.m., on the night before departure, Theo's temperature spiked suddenly. Roman reached the crib first, lifting the fussy infant with practiced gentleness. 102.3, he reported, reading the temporal thermometer while Maeve prepared the fever reducer. They moved in sync now, 3 days of shared care having taught them each other's rhythms. Roman paced the length of the nursery, murmuring to Theo in Italian while Maeve measured the medication with steady hands. Time stretched as they waited for the fever to break. Theo's small body radiated heat against Roman's chest, leaving damp patches on his expensive shirt. Neither parent spoke much, their focus entirely on the baby's labored breathing. When Maeve finally kissed Roman, it wasn't planned. The moment simply arrived. Theo's fever starting to fade, relief making her reckless, gratitude overwhelming her caution. Roman went still beneath her touch, his jaw tightening with restraint. "After he's safe," he said, the words rough with promise and restriction. The hardest part was waiting. Every minute seemed to drag, weighted with the knowledge that morning would bring either salvation or disaster. They couldn't rush Theo's recovery, couldn't force his little body to process the medication faster. By 1:10 a.m., Theo's breathing had finally settled into a steadier rhythm. Maeve curled beside him on the daybed, one hand resting on his chest to feel each breath. Roman took up position in the chair by the window, his silhouette sharp against the city lights. The night passed in slow motion. Every car horn from the street made them tense. Every shadow seemed to hold potential threats. The monitors beeped their steady reassurance while armed men patrolled outside. Cade's systems hummed in the background, scanning for digital intrusions. Enzo coordinated the final security preparations with silent efficiency. The house held its breath, waiting for dawn. As 6 a.m. approached, the first pale light began seeping through the windows. It painted delicate patterns through the crib bars, turning ordinary metal into something almost magical. Theo slept peacefully now, his fever gone, unaware of the journey ahead. Enzo appeared in the doorway like a shadow, his voice pitched low. "Convoy rolls in 40 minutes, boss." Roman nodded, his eyes never leaving his sleeping son. The moment they'd planned for was almost here. In 40 minutes, they would need to trust in preparation, skill, and perhaps a little luck to get Theo to safety. Maeve stirred on the daybed, already reaching for Theo before she was fully awake. The habits of motherhood ran deep. Roman watched them both, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. The house began to wake around them. Security teams checked weapons and communications gear. Medical equipment was packed with military precision. Somewhere below, engines turned over as drivers warmed up armored vehicles. Every detail had been planned, every contingency considered. Now they just had to execute perfectly, knowing that one mistake could cost them everything. The weight of that responsibility settled over the nursery like a physical presence. Morning light continued to strengthen, pushing back the shadows. Soon, they would need to move, to set their carefully crafted plan in motion. But for these last few minutes, they remained still, a family forged by crisis, watching the dawn paint hope across their sleeping child's face. At 6:45 a.m., Maeve's hands trembled slightly as she secured Theo into his carrier. The armored SUV's interior smelled of new leather and gunmetal. Roman stood watch, his body angled to shield them both while Enzo did a final sweep of the vehicle. "He's still sleeping," Maeve whispered, adjusting the blue blanket around Theo's tiny form. The medication had kept his fever down through the night, his breathing steady and unlabored. The convoy assembled with practiced precision. A cheerful florist van led the way, packed with heavily armed men instead of roses. A sleek town car followed, then their SUV, with a massive sanitation truck bringing up the rear. On paper, it looked like ordinary morning traffic. Roman's hand rested on her shoulder, warm and steady. "Stay close to me, no matter what happens." They merged into early traffic at 6:55 a.m. Cade's voice crackled through their earpieces, monitoring traffic cameras and signal patterns. Silvio drove with the smooth efficiency of someone who'd done this 100 times before. The city crawled past their tinted windows. Coffee shop workers unlocked doors. Street cleaners pushed their brooms. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Maeve's EMT training screamed at her that the quietest scenes often exploded fastest. At 7:12 a.m., that instinct proved deadly accurate. They were passing under a rusted overpass when another sanitation truck, one that shouldn't have been there, slammed into their lead vehicle with devastating force. The impact echoed like thunder. Smoke billowed from somewhere ahead. Maeve clutched Theo's carrier as their SUV swerved, tires screaming. Roman was already moving, gun drawn, barking orders into his comm unit. Doors flew open on all sides. Men in dark tactical gear poured out of hidden positions, the air filled with shouts and the metallic rack of weapons being charged. Through the chaos, Maeve spotted a woman in EMT blues pushing through the crowd. Something about her stance felt wrong, too practiced, too purposeful. Before Maeve could shout a warning, the woman had produced official-looking badges and was reaching for Theo's carrier. "No!" Maeve's scream tore through her throat as the woman wrenched the carrier away and sprinted toward a waiting van. Theo woke with a startled wail that cut through the mayhem like a knife. Roman burst from the SUV, glass fragments sparkling in his hair. Blood ran down his shoulder, where a bullet had grazed him, but his movements were precise and lethal. He dropped two attackers without breaking stride, trying to cut through the crowd toward their son. "Enzo, block that van!" Roman's voice carried over the chaos. Enzo responded instantly, ramming their backup vehicle into Morozov's transport with a sickening crunch of metal. Silvio materialized beside Maeve, shielding her with his body as he guided her toward a side ramp. "Stay low, stay with me," he ordered, his usual warmth replaced by professional focus. Cade's voice crackled through their earpieces. "I've got a signal! The monitor we planted in his blanket, it's still transmitting!" Maeve stumbled, caught between running toward Theo and following Silvio's lead. Her training warred with her instincts. Stay safe to help later, or risk everything now. Roman appeared beside her, his suit jacket dark with blood. He was wrapping a belt around his shoulder with mechanical efficiency, his expression carved from stone. "You're coming with me," he said, checking his pistol. "Because if this goes wrong, we break together." The words hit her like physical blows. Not a command, but a promise. "Ferry terminal," Cade reported, his fingers flying over multiple screens. "They're heading for the abandoned Hudson Pier. Signals weak, but holding." Enzo pulled up in one of their remaining SUVs, the engine growling. Behind them, the decoy florist van burned, sending clouds of smoke into the morning air. Another vehicle screeched to a stop beside them, Silvio at the wheel, already plotting alternate routes through morning traffic. Roman helped Maeve into the SUV, his movements efficient despite his injury. "Time?" he demanded. 7:28, Cade replied. "Signal's still moving north along the river." The two vehicles peeled away from the ambush site, tires throwing gravel. In the rear view mirror, Maeve watched their carefully planned convoy disappear into smoke and chaos. her hands clenched into fists, nails cutting into her palms. Ahead lay the river, the ferry terminal, and their son. Behind them, sirens began to wail. Too late to help, perhaps just in time to complicate their rescue mission. The city blurred past as they accelerated, racing against time and the growing distance between them and Theo. Roman pressed his comm unit. Status on the target vehicle. White van, commercial plates, Cade responded. They're maintaining traffic laws, trying to blend in. 3 heat signatures in the cab, 1 small one in the back, signals holding steady. Maeve forced herself to breathe, to think. The woman's EMT uniform had been perfect. Current patches, proper creases. This wasn't a rushed job. They'd been planning this, waiting for their chance. How did they know? She asked, her voice raw. They didn't, Roman replied grimly. They had multiple teams placed along our route. We'll find out how they knew the route later. Right now, we focus on Theo. The SUVs wove through traffic with precision, never fast enough to draw attention, but eating up distance with ruthless efficiency. Every second felt like an eternity. Every red light was an agony of restraint. Theo's monitor signal blinked steadily on Cade's tablet, a tiny blue dot moving inexorably toward the river. Maeve watched it pulse, clinging to that electronic heartbeat as proof that they hadn't lost everything. Not yet. Not while they could still fight. At 7:41 a.m., they breached the ferry terminal in tight formation. The salt-laden air hung heavy with rust and abandonment. Silvio led Maeve through the shadows, while Roman took point, his movements predatory despite his injured shoulder. Their footsteps echoed off corroded metal walls as they advanced. Ancient chains creaked overhead, and somewhere, water dripped with metronome persistence. Through broken windows, dawn painted weak shapes across debris-strewn concrete. They found Morozov in what had once been a waiting area. He stood behind a metal table, one hand gripping Theo's carrier. An oxygen line snaked from a portable unit to the baby's nose. Theo lay unnaturally still, his tiny chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. "Close enough!" Morozov called out. His accent cut through the hollow space. "We discuss terms now." Roman's pistol remained steady, seeking a clean shot that wouldn't risk Theo. "Name them." "Simple. 10 years of dock operations. My people, my schedules, my shipments." Morozov's fingers danced near the oxygen line. Or perhaps this tube becomes disconnected. "Take me instead," Roman said, his voice flat. "Full surrender." Morozov's laugh bounced off the walls. "Always so dramatic, Valenti, but no, I want the docks." He wrapped the oxygen line around his finger, a subtle threat. Maeve stepped forward, hands raised and trembling. "Please," she began, her voice cracking. "He's just a baby. He was early, 8 pounds, 4 ounces. The nurses said he was a fighter from his first breath." Morozov's attention flickered to her. She pressed on, spilling every detail she could remember. His first smile was at 6 weeks. He loves when I sing Twinkle, Twinkle. He has this little duck that makes him laugh. Her voice caught. "Please, I'm just a mother. I work double shifts at a coffee shop. I'm nobody." While she spoke, Roman shifted incrementally left. Enzo ghosted right, staying in the shadows. Silvio edged closer to the table's base. "Touching," Morozov sneered. "But business is business." Roman's shot cracked through the air. The ancient light fixture above exploded in a shower of sparks and glass. In that instant of chaos, Enzo drove forward in a low tackle. Silvio's boot connected with the table base, sending it skidding. Maeve lunged through the falling sparks. Her hands found the carrier's handle as Roman's second shot rang out with surgical precision. Morozov screamed, his mangled hand dropping the oxygen line. The room erupted. Boots thundered on metal stairs as Roman's reinforcements stormed in. Morozov's men scattered like roaches, abandoning their boss to save themselves. Enzo and Silvio secured the perimeter, while Roman seized Morozov by his intact hand. "This ends now," Roman growled, dragging him toward the exit. "Or we'll finish this somewhere quiet, no cameras, no witnesses. Just you, learning why you never touch my family." Bennett appeared through a side door, medical bag in hand. He moved straight to Theo, checking vital signs with practiced efficiency. "Oxygen saturation holding," he reported. "Pulse stable, but we need to get him back to the townhouse immediately. He needs monitoring and stabilization before we attempt any travel." Maeve clutched the carrier to her chest, her hands still shaking. The adrenaline crash hit hard as she followed Bennett to a waiting vehicle. Behind them, Morozov's Muffled protests faded into the growing morning. They settled into the SUV's back seat, Theo secured between them. Roman's shirt was streaked with blood from his shoulder wound, but his arm was steady around Maeve as she finally broke. Her sobs came in gasping waves, months of fear and hours of terror pouring out against his chest. Through the tinted windows, emergency lights began painting the neighborhood in red and blue. Sirens wailed in the distance, but their driver took them down quiet side streets, away from the coming storm of questions and investigations. The clock on the dashboard read 8:15 a.m. Theo slept peacefully, unaware of the morning's violence. His oxygen levels held steady on the portable monitor Bennett had attached. In the growing light, his dark eyelashes cast tiny shadows on his cheeks. Roman's hand tightened on Maeve's shoulder as they turned toward home. His shirt was damp with her tears, but he didn't move away. They sat in exhausted silence, connected by the precious weight of their sleeping son between them, while the city slowly woke to another ordinary morning. Behind them, police radios crackled with reports of gunfire at the ferry terminal. Evidence teams would find shell casings and blood spatter, but no witnesses would step forward. The morning's violence would become another unsolved case in a city full of secrets. Inside the SUV, Maeve's breathing slowly steadied. Her fingers remained locked around the carrier handle, knuckles white with tension. Every few seconds, she checked Theo's face, his chest, the secure clips of his harness, reassuring herself that he was really there, really safe. Bennett monitored Theo's readings from the front seat, making notes on his tablet. The medical equipment beeped softly, a regular rhythm that helped ground them all in the present moment. Each sound confirmed that their son was alive, stable, and back in their protection. The townhouse waited ahead, its security systems primed and reinforced. Inside, a fresh medical setup stood ready in the nursery. There would be time later for new plans, for healing, for consequences. But for now, in the quiet of the SUV, they simply breathed together, a family forged in crisis, tempered by fear, and bound by something stronger than blood. Bennett's stethoscope moved across Theo's chest with methodical precision. The morning sun filtered through bulletproof glass, casting warm squares across the nursery floor. It was 9:05 a.m., and the townhouse hummed with controlled tension. "His heart sounds are stable," Bennett announced, making notes on his tablet. "Oxygen saturation holding at 95%. If these readings maintain, we can proceed with the transfer to Zurich this evening." Maeve exhaled shakily, her fingers trailing over Theo's tiny hand. The morning's terror had left shadows under her eyes, but her spine remained straight. From the hallway, Roman's voice carried, low, controlled, deadly. "I want it handled permanently. Courts, ports, everything. Make it look natural, but make it final." Maeve's head snapped up. She pressed a kiss to Theo's forehead before stepping into the corridor where Roman stood with his phone, shoulder freshly bandaged beneath his shirt. "A permanent solution?" Her voice was quiet but cut like glass. "Do you understand what that means? Not just for the city's power structure, but for who you are to our son." Roman's jaw tightened. "Monsters answer to different courts, Maeve. I won't gamble with the life we almost lost this morning. And what happens when he's old enough to understand? When he asks questions about his father's world? He'll understand that I kept him safe. That's what matters." Their standoff was interrupted at 10:12 a.m. by rapid knocking. A courier delivered a sealed lab memorandum marked urgent. Bennett reviewed it immediately, his expression grave. "There's a specific donor valve that would significantly improve Theo's odds," he explained. "It's currently at the Riverside Private Clinic." "Morozov's associates control that clinic," Roman said flatly. "They acquired that valve through fraudulent channels last month. I've already set plans to retrieve it." Maeve's hands clenched. "Did you consider that another child might need it?" "I considered one child first. Our child." Roman met her gaze without flinching. "The valve was obtained illegally. I'm simply correcting that particular wrong." The truth of it settled between them like lead. This was who he was, a man who would burn the world to protect his own. The realization both wounded and clarified. Roman moved to his office, Maeve following. He pulled out documents, signing each with precise strokes. "This transfers all emergency medical decisions to you if I'm incapacitated," he explained, sliding one across the desk. "This establishes Theo's trust fund, guaranteeing his future, regardless of what happens to me." The timestamp read 10:47 a.m. As Maeve added her signature, her hand steady, despite everything. Bennett appeared in the doorway. "We need to prepare for transport soon. The flight team is standing by." Roman nodded, moving to the wall safe. He removed a fresh jacket and shoulder holster, his movements careful around the bandage. The gun disappeared beneath perfectly tailored wool, invisible but present, like so much in their world now. Maeve returned to the nursery, where Theo dozed peacefully, unaware of the morning's violence or the weight of decisions being made around him. She lifted him gently, securing each buckle of the carrier with trembling fingers. Her eyes were red-rimmed as she worked, but her voice remained soft as she hummed Theo's favorite lullaby. The simple melody felt incongruous against the backdrop of armed men in the hallway and medical equipment being packed for transport. The townhouse staff moved with practiced efficiency, loading supplies under Bennett's direction. Cade worked from a corner, coordinating secure channels and flight clearances. Enzo supervised the loading of armored vehicles while Silvio checked and rechecked the route to the private airfield. At 11:45 a.m., Roman returned to the nursery. His fresh jacket hung perfectly, concealing both weapon and wound. He watched silently as Maeve finished buckling Theo into his carrier, her movements gentle but certain. The morning's fear had carved new lines around her mouth, but there was steel in her spine as she straightened. She was no longer just the woman who had appeared on his doorstep in desperation. She was the mother of his son, the keeper of his heart, and now the holder of his medical proxy, trusted with his life as he was trusted with theirs. Bennett did a final check of Theo's oxygen levels, while Maeve packed the diaper bag with practiced efficiency. Medications, monitors, comfort items all precisely arranged. Her hands moved automatically through the familiar motions while her mind processed the weight of the morning's revelations. The clock ticked toward 11:50 a.m. Outside, engines idled as the convoy assembled. Inside, the nursery held its breath. This room that had been their sanctuary now felt like a way station between what was and what would be. Roman stood in the doorway, power contained in every line of his body. The fresh jacket couldn't quite hide the predator's grace of his movements, the lethal capability that had saved their son. He was both more and less than the man Maeve had imagined during those lonely months of pregnancy, more dangerous, more devoted, more complicated in his certainties. Theo stirred slightly in his carrier, dark lashes fluttering against his cheeks. His small movements drew both his parents' attention, their focus narrowing to this tiny being who had rewritten all their definitions of necessity and compromise. The morning's violence felt both distant and immediate, a stark reminder of the world they inhabited now, where love and danger twined so tightly together it was impossible to separate them. Every decision going forward would carry the same weight, the balance between protection and price, between safety and souls. At 12:20 p.m., the second convoy slipped Sabio through narrow streets, taking a circuitous route that wound through residential neighborhoods. Roman's security team had mapped 3 alternate paths, each avoiding major arteries where ambush points could be staged. Cade's fingers flew across his laptop in the lead vehicle, sending false signals pinging across Brooklyn, Queens, and Manhattan. Decoys are running opposite trajectories, he reported through the secure channel. Traffic cams are looped on the primary route. In the armored SUV, Maeve cradled Theo's carrier while Bennett monitored the portable oxygen unit. Roman sat forward, eyes constantly scanning, his injured shoulder held rigid beneath his jacket. Every turn and pause was choreographed, every intersection pre-cleared by advanced teams. They approached the smaller private airfield from an access road usually reserved for maintenance vehicles. The jet waited on the tarmac, engines already spooling up. Unlike the main airports, this strip operated under different rules. Rules Roman had carefully arranged through channels that wouldn't appear in any official log. The transfer from vehicle to aircraft took exactly 90 seconds. Bennett moved his medical equipment with practiced efficiency, while Enzo and Silvio secured the perimeter. At 1:05 p.m., the wheels left American soil. Inside the cabin, Maeve settled against Roman's uninjured side, Theo sleeping peacefully in her arms. The private jet's interior was understated luxury, soft leather and polished wood. But the medical equipment clustered near their seats destroyed any illusion of a pleasure flight. Bennett maintained a quiet vigil, checking readings and adjusting flow rates with meticulous care. The hours stretched across the Atlantic, marked by the steady beep of monitors and the soft whoosh of supplemental oxygen. At 4:40 p.m., Zurich time, Theo stirred restlessly, his small face scrunched in discomfort as Bennett leaned in to assess him. The doctor adjusted the oxygen mixture with practiced hands, his voice low and soothing as he explained each change to Maeve. Roman's lips moved in silent prayer, words he hadn't spoken since standing at his brother's grave years ago. The ancient language felt rusty in his mouth, but the desperate plea behind it was razor sharp. Maeve watched his profile, noting the tension in his jaw, the way his hands clenched against his thighs. She reached over, threading her fingers through his. "You terrify me," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the engine hum. and somehow you make me feel safer than I've ever been. I don't know how both can be true." His fingers tightened around hers. He didn't speak, but the slight tremor in his grip said everything. The Swiss landscape emerged beneath them as they began their descent at 5:45 p.m. Mountains rose dark against the dimming sky, while city lights winked on in the valleys. They touched down at 5:58 p.m., the landing so smooth it barely disturbed Theo's rest. A medical transport van waited on the tarmac, its staff wearing the discreet uniforms of the private clinic. The transfer moved with practiced precision. Equipment first, then Theo's carrier with Bennett, hovering close, finally Maeve and Roman following into the climate-controlled interior. The clinic rose before them, a modern structure of glass and steel nestled against the mountainside. Security was subtle, but omnipresent. Roman's advance team had vetted every corner of the facility. They moved through quietly efficient halls to the pediatric surgical wing, where a team waited in blue scrubs. At 7:10 p.m., they reached the operating room doors. Maeve bent to kiss Theo's forehead, her tears falling silently onto his skin. Roman followed, pressing his lips to the same spot. "Ti prometto di meritare ciò che desidero per il resto della mia vita," he whispered, a vow to spend his life deserving what he wanted. The weight crushed them with its weight. Maeve paced while Roman sat motionless, only his eyes tracking her movement. Bennett provided updates when possible, but mostly they existed in a vacuum of uncertainty, measuring time in breaths and heartbeats. The surgery wing's waiting area was private, designed for families like theirs who required discretion. Still, Roman security maintained position at every approach. Enzo brought coffee that grew cold in their hands. Silvio reported regular all-clears. Cade monitored communications from a corner, ensuring their digital footprint remained invisible. Each hour dragged like a year. Maeve stopped pacing, only when exhaustion forced her into a chair. Roman's shoulders grew more rigid with each passing minute, the pain from his injury forgotten beneath the greater weight of waiting. At 11:46 p.m., the lead surgeon emerged, still in his surgical cap. His face showed bone-deep fatigue, but his eyes held wonder. The valve had seated perfectly. Theo's heart rhythm was strong and steady. There were no complications. Maeve's knees gave out. Roman caught her as she crumpled, gathering her against him as he sank into the nearest chair. His arms shook as they held her, the iron control of the past days finally fracturing under the weight of relief. They were led to recovery at midnight. The room was dim and quiet except for the steady rhythm of monitors painting green lines across their screens. Theo lay peaceful in his crib, small chest rising and falling with new strength. Maeve and Roman stood on opposite sides of the crib, their hands meeting on the rail between them, their fingers interlaced, holding on as if they could anchor each other against the tide of emotion threatening to sweep them away. At 12:30 a.m., they remained unmoving, their linked hands resting on the rail while they watched their son breathe. The monitors traced steady green paths across their screens, each beat a gift, each moment a promise kept. The late September sun painted Manhattan's skyline in honey gold when their private jet touched down. 3 weeks of Swiss mountain air had worked miracles. Theo's cheeks glowed pink beneath the wispy curls that had grown in during their stay. His surgical scar was healing beautifully, a thin white line that would fade with time. Maeve watched the city emerge through the SUV's tinted windows, her hand resting on Theo's carrier. The familiar streets felt different now, as if she were seeing them through new eyes. Roman sat beside her, his phone silent for once, attention divided between his family and the passing landscape. The townhouse rose before them, transformed from the fortress of their desperate days. Fresh paint gleamed on the trim, and window boxes overflowed with late-blooming flowers. The medical equipment was gone, replaced by toys and the careful organization of a proper nursery. Even the security cameras seemed less obvious, though Maeve knew they remained vigilant. Bennett waited in the newly brightened living room, his usual clinical precision softened by genuine pleasure as he examined Theo. The baby's laugh bubbled up during the checkup, a sound that made everyone pause to smile. "His recovery is remarkable," Bennett said, packing away his stethoscope. "The valve functions perfect, oxygen saturation exactly where we want it. He's meeting all his developmental markers." While Maeve settled Theo for a nap, Roman spread documents across his office desk. The past weeks hadn't been idle. He'd systematically dismantled Morozov's organization through legal channels where possible and other means where necessary. But more importantly, he'd begun restructuring his own empire. "These are the legitimate revenue streams," he explained to Maeve, indicating a stack of folders. Real estate holdings, shipping contracts, import-export licenses. All clean, all verified. The questionable operations are being closed or transferred, and this," he tapped another file, "is the complete investigation into the hospital bribery scheme. Every administrator, every fake waiting list, every dollar traced. The oversight committee will never blink again." Maeve studied his face, seeing the man who had moved heaven and earth to save their son, who was now moving mountains to build them a safer future. The dangerous edge remained, it always would, but it was tempered now by something deeper. As evening settled over the city, Roman led Maeve to the small chapel that had once felt like the bars of a gilded cage. Candlelight flickered across the ancient icons, casting warm shadows on the walls. He didn't kneel or offer flowery speeches. "Marry me," he said simply, holding out a ring that caught the light like captured stars. "I will never be a gentleman to the world, but to you and Theo, only to you, I offer everything soft in me, everything true." Maeve took the ring, sliding it onto her finger with steady hands. "Yes," she answered, "because I choose this. Choose you, not because I have to, but because I want to." The reception was intimate, family only in the truest sense of the word. Enzo raised a crystal glass, his usual stoic expression warmed by genuine joy. Silvio kept dabbing at his eyes with an embroidered handkerchief, mumbling about dust. Bennett danced with Sarah, the night nurse, who had helped monitor Theo through those critical first days, their professional distance forgotten in the celebration. The evening air carried a hint of autumn when Maeve stepped onto the balcony at 10:15 p.m. The city sprawled below, a tapestry of lights and shadows. Roman joined her, sliding an arm around her waist and drawing her close. Through the open doors, they could see the soft glow of Theo's nursery lamp, hear the gentle whir of the humidifier that helped him sleep. "You're the first thing I've ever wanted that made me better," Roman murmured against her hair. "Not stronger or more powerful. Better." Maeve turned in his embrace, resting her hands against his chest where his heart beat steady and strong. "Love didn't tame you," she said. "It just taught you where to kneel." The city hummed below them, a reminder that danger would always exist in their world. But here, in this moment at 10:30 p.m., with their son sleeping safely nearby and their futures intertwined, they had written a different kind of story, one where devotion spoke louder than violence, where protection meant more than possession, where love didn't soften the edges but gave them purpose. The nursery lamp cast a gentle glow through the open doors, turning the balcony into an island of warmth in the night. They stood together under the clear sky, Roman's arm around Maeve's waist, her head against his shoulder. The ring on her finger caught the city lights, tossing back tiny sparks like promises. Inside, Theo sighed in his sleep, turning toward the sound of his parents' voices. The monitors by his crib showed strong, steady rhythms, the cadence of a heart healed by medicine and protected by love. On the security feeds, Enzo and Silvio maintained their posts, guardians of this peace they had all fought to build. Bennett's final reports lay signed on Roman's desk, medical testimony to a miracle worked by determination and devotion. The moment held everything: the danger they had survived, the battles they had won, the future they had chosen. Not a fairy tale, but something rarer. A love story written in scar tissue and bullet casings, in hospital corridors and quiet chapels, in the space between what they were and what they chose to become.